Hungarian Folk Tales. The Shepherd and the Snake. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a poor shepherd boy. The only thing the shepherd boy possessed was a little donkey, and he spent his days guarding the mayor's flock of sheep. He sat watching the flock one day and thinking how unfair it was that some people had money and were rich, while others had none and were poor. He sat thinking and thinking when he suddenly heard the sound of crying. "Help me! Help me!" The boy followed the sound of crying and walked to a hole in the ground, where he came upon a yellow-bellied snake wriggling in a fire. "Help me, shepherd boy, and I will soon repay the favour." So the boy held out his stick, and the yellow-bellied snake slithered up it and out of the fiery flames. Then the snake said, "Follow me, and you should know that my father is the king of all snakes." The yellow-bellied snake slithered along, and the young shepherd walked quickly behind. He left his donkey to watch over the sheep. The boy followed the snake until they found themselves in a forest, where the yellow-bellied snake suddenly slithered under a flat stone. The snake shouted back, "Push the stone away and follow me." The young shepherd did as the snake had said and revealed steps going down into the ground. And he walked down and down and down until he arrived in a beautiful diamond meadow. "This is my father's palace." And the gate to the palace was guarded by two very large snakes. There the yellow-bellied snake slithered in, and the young shepherd followed close behind. They passed through one room after the other until they arrived at the throne room that sparkled with silver and gems. The walls were studded with diamonds, and everything was decorated in precious metal. The Snake King was sitting proudly on an enormous throne, and when he wanted to give his servants an order, he would simply flick his tail and bells would ring. Then the yellow-bellied snake hurried up to the king and embraced him. "Father dear, don't harm this poor shepherd boy because he saved me from the fire." "Now, young shepherd boy, you may choose from two things as your reward for saving my son. You can learn to speak to all the animals, or I can give you a bag of gold." The poor shepherd boy thought hard because he was sorely tempted by the promise of riches, but he would never ever have the chance to learn the language of the animals again. And so that is what he chose. "Come here, my child," said the Snake King. So the young shepherd boy approached the fearsome snake, and the king hissed in his ear, and he instantly understood what the king was saying to his snake son. So then the poor shepherd boy bid farewell to the yellow-bellied snake and his father the king, and started to walk back the way he had come. He walked on until he came to the beautiful meadow, climbed back up the underground steps, and re-emerged into his own world once more. Then he herded his sheep up and sat down to reflect on all that had happened to him that day. And as he sat there, two tiny birds flew up and landed in the top of a tree, where they sat talking to each other. Did you know? If that poor shepherd boy only knew what lies at the foot of this tree, he would not stay poor for one day more. But the young shepherd heard this and understood all they said. So he swiftly drove his sheep back to their owner, picked up his sharpest axe, and walked back to the forest to the tree where he had sat. And he dug until he discovered, to his great delight, a big pot of gold. As evening fell, he took the gold home and never had to watch the mayor's sheep again. Then he soon bought a beautiful house with plenty of land, married his bride, and they both lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Hare and the Hedgehog. One sunny summer day, a hare and a hedgehog met in the meadow. The hare began to tease the hedgehog and said, "Hey, hedgehog, how can you even walk alone, let run with those stumpy little legs of yours?" This upset the hedgehog. "Well, I'm sure I can run faster with my little legs than you can run with your lanky long ones." Now the hare was upset. "I don't believe that." "Well, if you don't believe it, hare, let's make a wager." So the two of them placed their wagers, and then the hare said to the hedgehog, "Well then, hedgehog, shall we race?" To this the hedgehog said, "Tomorrow morning, when the 8 o'clock train leaves the station." The hare said, "But why not now, hedgehog? Because I have to go home to eat my supper. Let's meet again here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp." So the hedgehog went home. After they had eaten, the hedgehog told his wife what had happened. "Just imagine, I made a wager with the hare that I can run faster than him." The hedgehog's wife said, "Don't be foolish. How could you possibly run faster than the hare?" "Well, we'll find that out tomorrow morning." The following morning, the hedgehogs got up, ate a hearty breakfast, and went out to the meadow. They didn't go to the place where they should meet the hare, but instead stood at the other end of the meadow. Then the hedgehog told his wife to hide herself in a furrow. He told her, "When the hare arrives, you are to shout out, 'I'm already here, hare!'" Then the hedgehog walked to the far end of the meadow where he met the hare. Hello there, hare. Hello there, hedgehog. Are you ready to race? Yes, I am. Then shall we run? Yes, let's run. But how shall we run over such a bumpy field? The hedgehog said, It's simple. I shall run in one furrow and you in another, and so we won't bump into each other while we're racing. That sounds like a very good idea. Then the hare stood ready in one furrow and the hedgehog in another, and the hedgehog told the hare, I shall count, and when I get to 3, we start to run. And then the hedgehog counted 1, 2, 3. Then they both began to run, but the hedgehog only ran 2 steps and hid himself deep in the furrow. But the hedgehog's wife was sitting waiting at the other end of the meadow when the hare arrived, and she shouted, I'm already here, hare. And the hare said, That was no good. Let's race again. Then they turned back and began to run in the opposite direction. But this time the hedgehog's wife only ran 2 steps and hid herself deep in the furrow. The hare did his best to run faster than he had ever run before. But when the hare arrived back at the beginning of the meadow, the hedgehog said, I'm already here, hare. That was no good. Let's race once more. So they turned around and ran back again, but the hedgehog quickly hid in the furrow again. The poor hare ran as fast as his legs would carry him, and when he got to the other end of the meadow, the hedgehog's wife said, I'm already here, hare. That was no good, said the hare. Let's run one last time. But the foolish hare felt dizzy and his legs began to tremble, and he stood in the middle of the meadow, too tired to continue. The little hedgehogs laughed at the silly hare. They had won. The pair of them laughed all the way home, and they are probably still laughing to this very day. Hungarian Folk Tales. The 7 Kids. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a mother goat, and the mother goat had 7 young kids. One day the mother goat said, Now be careful, children, because I'm going to the meadow to bring you fresh grass to eat. Don't worry, we'll be good, the little kids said. So the old mother goat set off for the meadow, and then she shouted back, And don't let any strangers in, because I won't be back until evening. The wily wolf had been listening outside all this time. Well, he thought, I have my chance at long last. Hardly an hour had passed before the wily wolf went to the window and called into the kids. Darling children, open the door because I have brought fresh grass for you to eat. The little kids laughed when they heard his gruff voice, but our mother will only be back in the evening and her voice is much sweeter than yours. The wolf was furious and ran away until he came to a field full of turnips. There he pulled up a turnip from the ground and ate it to make his mouth dry and his voice sweet. Then he hurried back to the house and called to the kids, Darling children, open the door because I have brought you fresh grass to eat. And the little kids were about to open the door when the eldest looked out of the window and saw the wily wolf's bony black hand and shouted, "Don't open the door because our mother has white hands, not black." The wolf was furious for a second time. Then he thought for a moment and ran until he came to the village bakery. When he arrived, he asked the baker for a sack of flour to make his hands white, but the baker was busy kneading bread and asked him to wait. But the wily wolf was very impatient and could not wait a moment longer. "I'll be dining on goat meat tonight," and he hurried back to the house. By the time he arrived back, it was late in the day, and he put his hand up onto the windowsill. With his white hand and his sweet voice, the kids were convinced that their mother had returned from the meadow at last. Then the wolf shouted into the kids, "Darling children, open the door because I have brought you fresh grass to eat." And the silly kids jumped for joy because they had fresh grass at last. One kid hid under the bench, the second in the corn bin, the third in the ash bucket, the fourth in the wash basin. The three other kids stood petrified in the middle of the room. They were all so terrified that they would happily have hidden in a matchbox, but there was none in the house because their father did not smoke a pipe. Then the wily wolf pulled the kid out from under the bench, the kid out of the corn bin, the kid out of the ash bucket, but the clock door was so small that his long tongue wouldn't fit inside. "Oh, how full I am," he said, and stroked his fat belly. Then the wolf went out to the meadow where he lay under the mulberry tree and soon fell fast asleep. As evening fell, the mother goat returned home from the meadow and nearly died of shock when she saw the door wide open and her little house empty. She began to call, "Kiddie, kiddie, come here." She was sitting and crying when she suddenly heard a tiny voice speak, "Don't cry, mother dear, because I am here." Then the last of her kids appeared, who was delighted to see his mother, but even more delighted to see the fresh green grass. "And where are your brothers?" Then the little kid told his mother how the wily wolf had tricked them. "Oh," his mother said, "so that is who I saw resting in the meadow when I was walking home. Hurry, child, and fetch me a needle, thread, and a pair of sharp scissors." And while her son searched, the mother goat took a rest after a very tiring day indeed. They soon arrived at the meadow, where they saw that the wolf was still sleeping. "Gather rocks, quickly, quickly." Then the mother goat slit the wily wolf's belly open, and the other 6 kids leapt out. "Now let's teach the wily wolf a lesson," the mother goat said, "and fetch as many rocks as you can while he is still asleep." They soon collected a big pile of rocks and packed them into the wily wolf's belly before their old mother stitched it back up again. Then she told her kids to hurry back home because the wolf would surely be in a terrible mood when he awoke. So the 7 kids all ran back to the house and watched from the window to see the wolf awake. When the wily wolf awoke, he was very thirsty and he thought to himself, "I shall go down to the stream and take a drink because the 6 kids in my belly must be really thirsty." The wily wolf struggled to his feet and he smiled to himself when he heard the rocks rumbling in his belly. When he got to the stream, he leant down to take a good drink, but the rocks in his belly were so heavy that he fell headfirst into the water and was washed clean away. The wolf floated on the water, and the stream passed right before the kids' house, and they laughed when they saw the wily wolf wash past. But the wolf could not swim and was drowned in the deep. And if that wily wolf had not drowned, my tale would have never ended.